The Success in South Florida podcast is brought to you by the team at Rossen Law Firm. If you need DUI or criminal defense representation, call the Rossen Law Firm at 754-206-6200 or check the description of today's episode for more contact information. The Rossen Law Firm, helping good people when bad things happen so they can achieve their best futures.
Welcome to Success in South Florida, featuring interviews with entrepreneurs, leaders, and other movers and shakers across South Florida to find out how they're doing their part to enhance the local community. Your host is Adam Rossen, the founder and CEO of the Rossen Law Firm. Adam's an award-winning attorney, former prosecutor, and a lifelong South Florida resident. He became an attorney because he believes in helping those in need and in crafting lifelong relationships in the community. This podcast is an extension of that mission. Let's get to today's interview. Here's Adam Rossen.
All right, and welcome back to another episode of Success in South Florida. And on today's podcast, we have Jonny Nalepa. Jonny, so great to have you on the pod. And I'm not even going to give the introduction. I want you to introduce yourself and tell us about all the amazing things you got going on.
Well, I appreciate it, Adam. Thank you for having me. I love what you're doing, by the way. I think this is amazing.
Thank you.
So I'm Jonny Nalepa. I am the owner and operator of Smart Aquatics, a firm that I recently founded in the end of 2019, just before COVID. I thought that was a great time to start a business, apparently. So we design and engineer outdoor living spaces for the luxury residential market. So basically anything with water, swimming pools, water features, koi ponds, we design, engineer, and we do like on-site consulting and construction management.
Awesome. And I want to talk a ton about that. The messaging on your website is amazing because it's all about client experience, right? The experience of outdoors, and that's exactly what you're selling. You're not selling a pool, right? You're selling an amazing experience. We could talk about that. But before we do, I want to get into who you are, right? Why are you on a podcast in South Florida talking about success? Right. So Jonny,
the same question. How much time do we have?
Right. How'd you get on here? Well, let's talk about your superhero origin story.
So I'm a second generation pool professional, for lack of a better description, right? My parents started a pool company some 45 years ago that my brother is now operating. And so I used to be a pool boy. I used to drive around with my dad in his truck and help him do the minor tasks, right? Cleaning tile inside the pool, emptying the skimmer basket, whatever a 7-8-year-old could do, carrying the chlorine jugs. And so that's kind of how I got into this. And it's a very, what we do is very unique. It's a very specialized industry. There's not a lot of, you can't go to school for this, right? You can go to school for design. You can go to school for architecture, landscape architecture, but there really isn't anything specialized to the aquatics industry. So it's really, it's a trade skill. You have to learn how to do this in the field. And so that is one of the biggest proponents, what got me to where I am today is because I have that experience. I grew up, this is a family business. So, unlike most families, we had, water chemistry test kits on the kitchen counter, and PVC pipe laying around in the garage. And so that's how I got into this. And from there, this is the very short version of it. As I got a little bit older, I had a passion for design. I was always creative. My mother was she was very artistic. And so I kind of got that from her, and just having that creative mindset, I guess. I went to school and I studied architecture for a little bit. I didn't get a master's degree in architecture or anything because just ultimately school just never really, I couldn't sit still for long enough, I guess, So at some point, the marriage of the design side of things, where I studied architecture and I was the creative type and very artistic and interested in design. And then my skill sets of, being in the aquatics industry. And, I did that for most of my life. I was a pool boy, right, for 25 years. And so when those two things converged for me is when I really started, got into my career and when I started moving forward in that career, I guess.
Right. Well, and so Jonny, growing up, I read what you have on your site about you, and the American school system is so focused on math, history, right, English, and these core competencies. And you talk about how your kind of mind was wandering most of the time, and you loved art. right? And so talk to us about that, right? Because not having to have to do the traditional education route. I mean, I know you went to Chaminade Madonna. That's, I went there. I graduated maybe about 8 years before you did. Our paths didn't really cross until recently. But it's got to be tough in some ways trying to be pigeonholed, throughout your childhood and teenage years into school. And if you don't get straight A's, you're not smart or you're not going to be successful. And then I think a lot of times the schools, they don't have a focus on the arts or on just the non-traditional schooling method. So how was that like for you, especially in middle school and high school growing up?
No, that's a great question. And, growing up, school was just, for whatever reason, school was like fun for me, right? I guess I didn't get it. It just I wasn't built for that. And actually, very early on in middle school, we went to St. Rose of Lima. It was a private Catholic school in North Miami. So my parents, they worked their ass off to put us to nice private schools, and that, even Chaminade. And owning a pool business, my parents were blue collar. They didn't have all the money in the world either. So, and my parents didn't go to college either. So myself and my brother, we were the first kids in our family line to go to college. So my dad was always like, you got to get an education. You got to get an education, because that was like the socioeconomic, that was the social ecology of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s stuff. Now we're starting to see that change a little bit, right?
Yep.
Finally. Entrepreneurship. Yeah. When we were kids, entrepreneurship was like, meant you didn't have a job. Now,
right.
Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. And I think we were at the tail end of that, right? I think we weren't in the thick of it. We were at the tail end of that. But yeah, it does kind of, as a kid, I was always getting in trouble, and I just couldn't understand why, and I was not interested in that stuff. I was drawing when teachers were talking, but there was always a handful of teachers that kind of realized that it wasn't that I wasn't smart or that I wasn't capable. They would actually, some teachers even pull my parents to the side and were like, Jonny never pays attention in class, but every time I call on him and ask him a question, he has the answer. Or like so she's like, I know it's not that he's not paying attention. He just seems, I just couldn't focus. I had a lot of energy. And actually at a very young age, and this was alarming to me, finding this out when I was a few years younger than I am now, but the school's answer for a child like myself that just wasn't, I couldn't sit still, and I was, speaking out of turn maybe, or whatever it was. They tried to put me on Ritalin. They suggested to my parents to put me on drugs. And so thank God I had a mother that cared enough to go get a second opinion. She took me to the doctor, and apparently the doctor took one look at me in the waiting room and was like, there's nothing wrong with him. I was sitting there like a coloring book or something.
Right.
And she's like, he's a kid, man. It's like kids,
Right.
So, I mean,
and I'll tell you, Jonny, I think one of the worst things that happened over the last 30 years or so, 30, 40 years, was the over prescribing of Ritalin and Adderall to children and teens. I think it's absolutely terrible what they did.
I mean, at the time, I was unaware of any of this, obviously, right? I was a kid. But now, like, knowing that, as I got old enough, my mother would tell me those kind of things. My God, like, what kind of system or that's the answer is like, hey, maybe just give him some drugs. I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I would probably be a different person today if I had been on drugs that early on in my life.
Yeah.
My mom was just like, well, let's try this. So
instead of maybe changing some lessons and designing some things that are group projects or fun, or, people learn in so many different ways. Maybe you want to do some tactile learning or build something as opposed to trying to spit out and memorize who the Florida governors are in like 4th grade. Right.
Yeah.
Or learning. Not everybody needs to know about algebra. I think
it's a great example of like the traditional system that was the schooling system, education. It applies to everything, healthcare and everything else. It's the traditional system. I mean, obviously, I went through school, and when I wanted to apply myself, when I had to, when my parents made it a point, like, okay, I'm getting in trouble if I don't start to get good enough grades. I never flunked out of school. I wasn't a D student either. I was probably a C and B student at best, and I would argue that it's harder to come in. In high school, I didn't make it to class in time to second period. I was coming in with McDonald's, and actually one of my math teachers at the end of, I don't know if it was junior or senior year, he came up to me and found me in the hallways, and he shook my hand, and he's like, Mr. Nalepa, and he hated me, by the way, Mr. Lumblatt. I remember his name. I think everybody deserves a medal for putting up with me, but he found me in the hallways and shook my hand and was like, Mr. Nalepa, I don't know how you did it, but you passed my class. He's like, he's like, I don't know how you passed my class, but you were never here. I was like, well,
Hey, that's a special skill to pass when you don't even show up.
I think it's
that's
harder. Good. I think it's harder to do that than it is to get straight A's. Maybe, I don't know.
Right. So now, I know nowadays you're quite the entrepreneur. You have multiple businesses. I want to talk about all these different ventures, but did you, besides just being the kid that follows dad around, to projects and pools and different things, did you have some of that entrepreneurship in you? Were you somebody in middle school or high school that was flipping, CDs or this or that, or did that come kind of later on in life for you?
Not for me. I was a late bloomer, if you will. I think most of my life and most of my even careers up to that point, I wasn't really focused on anything. I wanted to have a good time. I was just kind of, a people person. But I think, what was brewing underneath that was, and maybe it was unconscious to me at the time, just, being exposed to the family business. My dad took us to all these projects, and I got to see him hire people, fire people, just deal with clients, happy clients, dissatisfied clients, at a very young age. That's what we did in the summertime. That's what we did after school. Sometimes we were late to school because we had to go, to help them with a job. So I think I was exposed to that at a very young age and for a long time, most of my life. And I never really had another job. I never really worked for anybody else. In the summers, I worked for a family friend, at their warehouse. And I also went to work for another family friend who also had another pool out for some of the summers. But other than that, that was my job. I never really had another job other than that. So I wouldn't say that I was any more entrepreneurial than anybody else. I think I had a different mentality of what a job was. And I think that I always knew that I was never going to work for somebody else, but it wasn't for somebody else, but it wasn't something that was obvious to me until you start working for other people. And then you realize, well, I have more experience than this guy. And
right.
It's like, well, maybe I should be running my own business.
Right.
But that was never the plan.
Yeah. And that brings up a good point because, there's quite the difference between being the entrepreneur and being the technician that just so happens to own a business, but you're really not treating it or running it like a business. Like, I don't know if you've ever read the book, The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, but that's what they talk about. And it's part book that goes through like the pieces. And then each chapter has a bit of an allegory of the story of Sarah for Sarah's Pies. And you got to get to see and work through. And it usually starts with, hey, I make great homemade pies. All my friends say I should start a pie business, right? And they have no idea. And then before you know it, they're an employee of Sarah's Pies, even though they're the owner. They're the employee owner. Right. And now they're working 80 hours to say that they're self-employed, but they really don't have an actual business and they're not an entrepreneur. And the focus of the book is until you build systems and processes and procedures and kind of in a way, McDonaldize it.
That's E-Myth? That's why most businesses fail, right? That's the book.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's the E-Myth Revisited. Why, like maybe and then the subtitle is probably why most businesses fail or something. Right. It's by Michael Gerber. It's a great book.
Yeah. That's one of two books that Manny actually sent me to read.
Okay.
So it was that one and Traction, but no, it's an interesting.
Yes.
So I haven't read it yet. It's on my list. I'm not a huge reader. I've been trying now the what do you call that? The audio books. When I run and stuff, that seems I seem to get farther along when I do that. But no, it's an interesting concept and it makes total sense, right? And you don't even realize it. If you're a great photographer, you want to do photography, you think, oh, I'm going to start a photography business. Come to find out, well, in order to run a photography business, you have to be the bookkeeper, the tax person, the salesman, so yeah, I found that out really quickly. But it's in Gary Vee. I follow a lot of these guys at Gary Vee and stuff, and they talk about that, the clouds in the dirt. I had the good fortune of being a practitioner. I got used to get my hands dirty and just, a lot of this stuff, it's almost luck, right? I just had the good fortune of that was what I grew up doing. And I love being out on the water. I love just water, the way it works. It's such an interesting thing and phenomenon. So that makes total sense.
Great. Well, so Jonny, what I want to do now is I want to take a quick commercial break and hear a word from our sponsors. And then I want to go deep into Smart Aquatics, want to know all about the stuff that you're doing, how you built it, what kind of the future holds for you. I know you're on social media everywhere, and your stuff is amazing. We follow it. And I know you're involved in some other projects and businesses. So I want to get into all of that. But I think right now what we're going to do is we're going to take a real quick break, hear a word from our sponsor, the Rossen Law Firm, and we'll be right back.
When something bad happens, who do you turn to? In South Florida, the answer is the Rossen Law Firm. Criminal and DUI defense for when bad things happen to good people. The Rossen Law Firm is a team of 8 criminal defense attorneys, including 2 board-certified criminal trial experts. They also have federal and white-collar divisions in the practice. To learn more about the team and how they can help you, connect on Facebook and Instagram at Rossen Law Firm. You'll also find helpful and entertaining videos on Rossen Law Firm YouTube channel. Just check this episode's description for all the ways you can connect.
All right, and we are back from our commercial break on the Success in South Florida podcast, and we're back with Jonny. So, Jonny, let's. I want to go involved and really let's talk about Smart Aquatics. And I know you gave us kind of little teasers and stuff, but how long have you been doing this?
So I started Smart Aquatics the end of 2019.
Right. That's right before COVID.
Just before, I think 3 months later, COVID started, and I was like, oh my God.
And look, the first few months of COVID, people kind of did nothing. But then after, I know a lot of people that said, well, screw it, I'm just going to do a big home project here and there. So did you actually get busy in 2020?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, a couple of things. First of all, I walked out of my previous job, to just before COVID. Like I literally walked out of the office one day. That was not the plan at all. I was actually a partner at that firm for, I was there for 5 years. After 2 years, I was making 10% of the earnings, and that's just a testament to, like we were talking about before, is like where I just kind of excelled at this stuff. So I grew really fast, and it wasn't long before I should have just probably been running my own firm, and I was the senior partner there and everything. So,
but you didn't have a plan. This wasn't a 6 month, 12 month. I'm going to start my own business. This was just spur of the moment.
Yeah, I found a firm. They do international design and stuff like that. I was like, oh man, this is exactly what I need. It was, I had the skill set of being, in the aquatics industry in the field, and I went to school for design, so I understood the softwares, AutoCAD and stuff like that. And so I picked it up, real quick. And after 2 years, the owner came into my office and he said, I see you hustle, I see you're hungry, and we're going to give you 10% of the earnings, and the rest is history. So I left there. Just creative differences. You kind of outgrow. You hit a ceiling, you outgrow it, and there was time for me to move on. But yeah, I left. I left without a plan. That was not the plan at all. The plan was I loved what I was doing there, and I assumed that one day I would just take over that business, and that would be that. They say life is. I know this is audio, you can't see. They say life is your plan is like a straight line, but in reality, it's one of these. The mountains.
Yeah, it just goes up and down, zigzag, backwards,
right.
Flips around.
That was probably the craziest thing I've ever done. It was the scariest, unplanned, and and it's almost like now it was the best thing that I ever did, and I almost recommend that everybody do that at some point. Obviously, take that with a grain of salt. But
how'd you grow it? And were you scared? We talk on the pod a lot about fear and fear's influence with people. Fear has been something for me. So I'll give you an example. For me, half my family are kind of entrepreneurs. The other half are the really smart technicians. And I've always had a bit of that fear growing up. It was a lot more growing up. And then I've always, and Manny actually functions a little bit this way too, of trying to put ourselves and conquer the fear and get out of our comfort zone. A lot of my personal and professional growth has been when I've been out of the comfort zone and conquered the fear. And even now with business decisions that we're making, it's because we've grown. The decisions are basically the same decisions, but there's an extra 0 or 2 on. We're not, our $500 decisions are now $5,000, and the $5,000 decisions are now $50,000 decisions, right, and so on and so forth. And you still have that level of fear. So with you, how was that, just with really no plan, starting your own and kind of balancing that fear behind it?
Well, I think the reality of it is look, nobody, if I was a first year associate, right, you're not going to walk out like that and start your own business. So I think I was at the point where I had enough of a network. I had enough. My name was out there in the industry. I had been to enough of the shows. So I had a network of friends, colleagues, that I've developed a relationship with over time. And so when I did leave, it was, and even to this point, we haven't really done any marketing. We just started getting on social media. So it was just a network. I started reaching out to everybody that I knew, letting them know that I was on and word got, it was a small industry. Word was getting around. And so I got a number of job offers from other big name companies in our industry. I went up to Tampa and I went up to Georgia and to meet people and take potential positions. And I ultimately I still have good relationships with those people today. And I ultimately just decided to do my own thing. I felt like if I didn't do it at this point, I would never, I'd probably regret it for the rest of my, at least try, right? That was the time to do it. But it was tough, man. It wasn't easy. It's not, it can be very challenging and very difficult. So, you leave there, you make enemies, right? Once you become competition, you start, they say that once you start doing what's best for yourself, you start to piss a couple people off and stuff. So,
right. Well, and really it's just people getting jealous and people who, maybe don't have an abundance mindset.
I really think that was a big eye opener for me in a number of ways. It really changed a lot for me, actually. I learned, I got to experience, you come to an industry and they do things a certain way and you're taught how to do things a certain way. So once I left and I started dealing with a couple different type of companies who all do similar things within our industry, but I got to see the inside of this, how this person, Ryan Hughes Design, they're doing $55 million a year. I got to work with Shane LeBlanc, who's a traveling consultant, and he does projects worldwide. They do the Ritz-Carlton in the islands and stuff. So I got to see how different companies work, and I was working with these individuals, just providing my services, and that really kind of opened new doors for me, really. But again, it wasn't without its challenges. Lawyers get involved with the previous company, and it's just I've told, maybe I can count on one hand the amount of people that I've told this, but when I left there, I mean, it wasn't, I went from designing, I think one of the last projects I designed at my previous firm, it was a $3.5 million, at the time, it was like a $3.5 million swimming pool.
Just for the pool.
Yeah, just for the pool. This is out in the island somewhere. It's still being built today. That's how, it's a crazy, crazy project. And I did the design development and all the hydraulic plans and everything for it. So I went from that to doing projects for $700 a pop, and I was doing in pools in Texas for $700. And you know what? To this day, I am probably more grateful for the individuals who were reaching out to me and say, "Hey, man, I know you do big things. I know you're used to doing these big projects. We're looking to make our plans a little bit better, and it saves them a little money and time in the field and stuff. So I'm willing to pay a little bit more. Can you help me out and we can work together?" And I was like, dude, like that meant the world to me that I had these individuals doing that for me. And that was really what kept me afloat for a while for the first year. The first year after that in 2020 was the full first year. I did $88,000 in revenue. And that was just me. And it's not a lot. It's not a ton of money. We live in Miami and during COVID and everything. So I had to borrow $2,500 from my mother to pay my mortgage. It was bad. And simultaneously, I've got these people who I used to work with. You think they're your friends and you go on trips, and I know their wives and their kids and their families, and they're coming after you with legal letters and calling people, tell them not to work with you and this kind of stuff. So, you hear these kind of things. It's all real. You hear people talk about you're going to make enemies and stuff, and it's real. You have to really, I think the biggest thing for me during those times, and this is, things that I'm truly grateful for, those relationships and connections that I made with the individuals, during my tenure at my previous firm, just calling me up and just saying, "Hey man, how you doing? Is there anything, do you need work? Is there anything you can do?"
The people that had faith in you and knew you and trusted you.
To this day, I still can't figure out what it is. These are individuals that's, they're wealthy individuals. They're well off. They're obviously they're farther along in their careers than myself. But for no other reason other than just checking in on me and giving me a good word of advice or something, whatever they could do to help. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand it. And that was a big help for me. It was a big difference. Just getting some words of encouragement here and there. Just keep your head down, follow the money and stuff like that. So I'm grateful to have that network, and not just colleagues, friends and stuff. That was really the difference for me.
So Jonny, were you able to kind of cultivate any mentors in your field during this period? And did you rely on them in any way, a little more than just kind of the, "Hey, how you doing? Want to make sure you're doing okay"? Like, did you seek out business advice or anything?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm like a sponge. I'm always And I'm a big believer in constructive criticism. So I'm always looking for advice and ways that we can do things better. So I guess it's hard to say it's a mentor, one particular mentor. I think that a couple of these guys have been mentors to me. You know, like Cesar Cortez, Ryan Hughes, Ray Corral, Jimmy Smith, Shane LeBlanc. There's so many guys that are just, you know, where I would like to take my career. That's they offered a helping hand, and not just in that sense. These are guys that I call for advice. You know, I still call these guys today, and just I'm learning how to be a leader now in my business, and I'm calling these guys for advice. So I think they're all kind of mentors to me in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's what it's about, you know, and you just rattled off 5 names. So I would definitely say you have some mentors, and it seems like some pretty successful ones. But, you know, I can tell you from my experience over the last 5-7 years, one of my major goals has been to cultivate a group of mentors that I can learn from, grow from, be friends with, throw ideas off of, learn either actively by saying, hey, call up so-and-so, I have an issue or a problem, what do you think? But also learn passively when we're out at functions and events and maybe at a dinner, just listening to the conversation and just being that fly on the wall. And especially when maybe 2 of my mentors are having a conversation, just sitting there and going, and, you know, and sometimes in amazement, just, wow, being like, their brains work at a totally different level. And, you know, kind of trying to be like, I got to remember all these different ideas and things that they're saying. This is brilliant. So that's been a big goal of mine over the last 5 to 7 years. And I think it's helped me tremendously personally and professionally to have that group of people that also you can be vulnerable with and say, hey, things are not going so well. What did you ever have a situation like what I'm going through now? And how'd you deal with it? So I think in business and in life, it's so important. I think
it's something that's, you know, it's almost becoming like a lost art in some senses. It is, I think, you know, money's the byproduct. I don't think it should be there's nothing wrong with it, right? If you're chasing money and stuff, but I think I get that from my parents and my dad, especially. You know, he's from Kentucky, and just kind of those Southern values. It's different up there. Something's in the water or the air, but people wave to each other. Everybody knows their neighbors.
Right.
And people
are actually nice.
Yeah. And I think that my dad, actually, quick story. So when my dad first came down to South Florida, he was, you know, one of his first jobs was selling suntan lotion on the beach at Fontainebleau. And he worked alongside Robert Bell, who's the owner of Banana Boat sun tan lotion. And he wrote a best-selling book, you know, maybe 10 years ago now. And it was called, forget what it was called, From Suntan Boy to CEO or something like that. And it was a New York Times bestseller. And he wrote in the book, he signed the front cover, and he put a little note to my dad, say, hey, to my old pool pal or whatever, read page 9. And you know, on page 9, he put in the book that at that time that, you know, they were selling suntan lotion at Fontainebleau, and he was trying to figure out how he could sell more product. And he was very business oriented in his sales, very analytical and stuff like that. And he said that one of his colleagues sold more suntan lotion than anybody else. He said that, you know, good-natured Southern boy from Kentucky who used to whistle Elvis tunes all day. And he's like, he sold more product than anybody else. And he was like, I wanted to see what, you know, how he did that. He's like, well, and he mentioned my dad's name, Gary Nalepa, and he said he just kind of would become friends with these people and just make relationships with them. He was just curious and talking to them. And he actually said that. So he took a page out of his book. And when he started doing that and becoming more personable with these prospects, that he sold a ton of product, and that kind of launched him into his next kind of venture. And you know, so,
well, I mean, that brings up a great point, because people buy from people who they know, like, and trust. You know, we call it, KLT, know, like, and trust. And in the Rossen law firm, you know, we're relationship builders, we're community builders. How do we do it? Through criminal defense. And so we can talk all day about how I'm always fun at parties when people say, how do you represent those people and this and that? I go, whoa, you know, and I look at that as an amazing opportunity to educate people on really what we do. But we're relationship builders. We're community builders. We have to know our clients, trust them. They have to trust us. And so many people in my industry think that we're the mercenaries. And that's been one of the easiest ways to differentiate ourselves from our competition is we are not the mercenaries. We are the best friend. We're the trusted advisor. We're the ones who come over for the Sunday barbecues. We're the ones who you call at 2 a.m. when there's an issue. And it doesn't always have to be criminal defense related. But when you build that type of relationship with human beings and with people, right, it's going to just naturally help the business. We do it because we love people, but of course it's going to make you sell better. It's going to make your business grow because that's what people want. People want connections. We're social beings. We're human beings that want connection and live in social groups. And so to me, that's so important and so effective. And plus it's just, forget about even being effective. I think it's the right thing to do.
I almost said that right before. Yeah, it's you hit it on the head, man. It really is. It's just, I think people want to know that you care. They want to be treated like a person, not a number, not a product. And I think that's what I learned early on is watching my parents do it. And now they had to, not every client, you can't please everybody either.
Right.
But it's how you handle those kind of things. But I got to see that early on and that's what we're big on. We push providing a service. You talked about the website and how we talk a lot about designing an experience. And we mean that. Like I'm passionate about what I do. This is literally who I am. I've been doing swimming pools and everything since I can remember. It's funny. I tell people the story, like I earned my stripes, because when I was like 8 years old, one time I was carrying 2 jugs of chlorine back on the side of the house back to the pool. And I was trying to see if I could get it all the way back there without putting them down. They're pretty heavy, I'm 8 years old,
Right.
Yeah. And so I did, I got them all the way back there. So I achieved my little goal there. I put them down. So, they were so heavy. I put them down so abruptly. I didn't have the caps on it. And one of the chlorine from one of the jugs splashed up into my eye. So I got directly in I thought I was going to go blind. So I jumped into the swimming pool. We flushed it out. No big deal. But yeah, so that's just it's a little tidbit story there for you.
No, that's
not sure that was relevant to anything we were talking about, but it just reminded me of.
I do, because it's a goal, right? So here you were at 8 years old and you're trying to push yourself to whether it's physical, mental, whatever, it's a physical goal that you were trying to push yourself to. And that's great. I think, being goal oriented is so important with success and having it out there. And look, some people are religious, some people are spiritual, some people are neither, but I've really learned over the years, I'm a big believer in the law of attraction. When you put something out in the universe, that it comes back to you. Some people call it karma, whatever. It's a little deeper than karma, but I'm just a big believer in that. So when you have goals and you can manifest these things when you put it out there.
That's one thing my father always told us growing up, and even my mother as well, that if you're gonna be a bear, be a grizzly kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he would say things like, when we were always working in, like when we were young, we would complain. He's like, "Oh, it builds character, and we're bonding and stuff." And at the time, you're like, roll your eyes, and But now you look at it, it's like, well, he was right. And I think that if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly thing, really, it just means like if whatever you do, man, just do it to the best of if you're a janitor, man, whatever you're doing, just do it to the best of your ability. Take pride in your work. That's really what he I think, really taught us the fundamentals of work ethic. And I think we did I was blessed. We did the hard stuff when we were younger. And now things kind of, I don't want to say they come easy, but if you're accustomed to working hard and doing your best and just taking and caring, like you said, like caring about your clients and trying to provide a better service, and because you care, that's a winning recipe. If you ask me, it becomes easy because I'm not really worried about the money. Obviously, we want to make money. I'd be lying to you if I said that we didn't.
Right.
But it's not just about it. It's about a lot more than that. And I think that's
right. Well, if it was just about the money, it'd actually be easier, because then you don't have to worry about the product, the quality. You don't have to worry about the relationships. It's transaction to transaction to transaction. Right. And who cares about anything else? That I think that's actually easier than building a business that's relationship focused, that's worried about long-term things. And, going back to the hard work and blue collar work ethic, when I was a high school basketball coach, we, I had teams that were amazingly talented, medium, and some that weren't so good. But when I coached my amazing teams, we won a state championship when I was a coach at American Heritage. I used to always say, and we do the same thing with the Rossen Law Firm. It's white collar skills and abilities with blue collar work ethic. And I think when you combine those two, you can be unstoppable. We're lawyers, right? We're in a white collar profession. Well, I can look at a client dead in the eye and tell them that we're immensely, immensely talented, but nobody will work harder than us.
That's great. That's
And
actually
to
the first
me,
time I've heard that. That's the
yeah,
first time I've heard that's great. That makes so much sense. It really does. You have to have
yeah,
both, I think. I really believe that.
yeah. Because, and it's really those roll your sleeves up and shovel the shit fundamentals and just saying, I'm going to outwork, or I'm going to work to make this beautiful. Whereas, you can look at a pool and a system and say they cut corners here, here, and here, and it'll make no difference to the homeowner, or the homeowner might not know for 10 years until something breaks and they need it replaced. And the person who looks at it says, hey, they cut corners here, and they would never know. And the transaction's already been made. Right. But that. And I think that's so important when you can see that and say, hey, I'm not going to do it. It's, for us, to me, it's the best or nothing. I'm not interested in mediocre, and I'm not even interested in good.
Right. Like, you're going to do it. Why
best.
do it if you don't want to be the absolute best at what you're doing? And it's interesting because as much as I have to be grateful for that side of my life, because that's what got me, the hustle and the work ethic and everything got me to a certain point, to where I'm at currently, right? Or the last couple of years. But then, that translates into a business and a financial structure where you have to, and I forget who said this on a podcast somewhere, but you have one of the hardest things that I've had to do. It's very challenging amongst, there's a number of things, but one of it, you have to kill the hustle to be the CEO. And so, because I was so used to, all right, I can just roll my sleeves up and get down, and I can work 20 hours tonight and get this project done in 2 days. And I did that for a while. I did that for about 2 years. I mean, I did it to the point where it was unhealthy and I got burnt out and everything. That's a whole nother discussion. But once I started, reading these books and learning how to be a business owner, you really have to shift gears, and you can't work hard forever, right? And working hard starts to look different. It needs to look different if you're going to scale your business, if you're going to grow your business.
More delegation, more trust, more project management,
exactly.
rather than just roll your sleeves up and do it.
Right. You start taking your hats off. And now look, no one outworks me still in my business. But my work looks different than it used to. I'm not digging ditches anymore out in the fields, in the trenches, in the middle of August either. Which, by the way, my dad sometimes still, he's like, oh, don't you miss it, man? Don't you miss working outside? And I'm like, hell no, man.
No, right. No.
Have you been outside lately? No, I don't miss it. Are you crazy?
I'm sweating after now. I'm sweating after 30 seconds outside now.
Yeah. But so that's been a big thing. And even it's a learning curve for myself, because you put people in, you start hiring people, and man, your natural, like, they're learning, and you have to let them learn. You have to let them grow. There was a time I was like, I wanted to just move somebody out of the way and say, look, I'll do it, because you can do it better and faster, but that's not how you grow. So you have to let them make the mistakes, and you just have to become the teacher, and you have to be a leader. And it's not as easy to make that transition when you're used to being the person that rolls up their sleeves and just get it done.
And most people aren't taught these things, right? So you have to either learn from experience or just seek out the learning yourself through podcasts, books, mentorships. I mean, it's kind of a DIY thing to really develop as a leader and as a business owner these days, and without a formal MBA training, which neither you or I have. So it's hard out there.
Yeah, it's something that I think I've probably learned the most through, believe it or not, social media, and obviously the books that I've been recommended, and everybody sends me books. It's funny because everybody started sending me books at some point, and I don't read. I don't read books, but it's cool. Right. I'm making my way through those. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but it's tough, because you hear people say, oh, it's the journey, not the destination, and I do believe that. But sometimes you gotta like pause and just take a day, or you gotta look up, or you're gonna miss it. 4 years have gone by, and it's like, man, where did it go? And you gotta keep yourself sane. You gotta get out every once in a while.
Right, of course. And so Jonny, so what's going on now with Smart Aquatics? What's the plan? What's the future? Where are you gonna be 1 to 3, years from now?
Well, look, we're in year 4 here. And we're on track to do $1 million in revenue this year, and that's the goal for this year.
Amazing.
I've had you have internal goals, external goals every year, and this year was like getting the right people in the right seats, and that's a traction reference right there for you.
Shout out to
so you started reading it. And so, obviously we have the financial goals and everything. We want to do that and get the right people. And because really you can't do anything without a team, man. I'm such a man. I'm such a big believer in having the right people around you.
Team is everything.
And not just having the right people, man. You got to take care of your team. Without them, where are you going? You're not going anywhere. And I think there's data behind that. I think a very large percentage, something like 80% of like small businesses never, which by the way, the classification for small business goes up to like, there's different classifications, and it goes up to like $50 million or something like that in America, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. And most of them don't exceed like $1 million in revenue. And it's because they don't have the processes. As they say, a service-based business, if you're a service, like not a software business or something that you can automate, a service-based business, you can only take it to $1 million in revenue, off just this blood, sweat, and tears kind of thing.
Right. Yep.
Other than that, it's physically impossible without processes. And I learned that, that's basically what I've done up to this point. And now I'm realizing, oh, wow.
Our last year and a half has been all about systems and processes and building it out and making sure nothing is left in somebody's head. And we've done a lot. We have so much more to do. It's kind of amazing. I'll tell you, maybe a year and a half ago, there's always something going on in the firm, but something was going on, not good or bad. It's just whatever. And I look at Manny and I go, do you realize we've become a very complex business? And he kind of looked back and he just said, wow, you're right. I'm like, who would have ever thought? I'm like, it used to be you and me, and we knew everything, and we had our trusty sidekick legal assistant, and what was there to worry about? What was there to write down? And it's like, no, we have departments and divisions, and people don't know this and don't know that, and we have to get things out of our brain. And it's been quite the journey, but it's been great. And we use a software called Trainual. I don't know if Manny told you about that or if you've heard about it, but it's an amazing software, Trainual. And so it's training manual. So it's our processes, procedures, it's our employee handbook, it's all of those things. It's a software. It's all, Google Chrome or any web browser. It's super easy. And it's very easy to change things. It integrates with Loom for videos, and we can drag and drop videos. So for example, a year and a half ago, we hired 3 legal assistants in 3 weeks, and 2 months later, only one was still here. And I was like, I'm sick and tired of giving the history of the firm's speech about how my blood, sweat, and tears over 15 years. And right. And we're like, and once we decided to move to Trainual, I said, I'm going to shoot this Loom video and I'm going to do it. And I'm never, ever, ever going to give this speech again. I love giving the speech, but it's just not the best use of my time. So I never give that speech ever again. And we have quizzes based on the different modules that we built. It's really cool software. And it's saved us hundreds of hours of time over the last year and a half. So that's something I would definitely look into.
I'm definitely gonna look into that. We're at that point where we were actually exploring Loom and starting making videos and stuff like that. Yeah. So definitely gonna look into that.
Okay. So it's this. So here you are now, getting right at that $1 million mark, building the team. How big is the team?
So we have 8 full-time employees right now, and we got like 2 subcontractors. So we've got a total of like 10 people that we're working on with a daily basis. And some of this stuff, it's interesting because, like you said, if had I known this stuff prior, that would have been great.
Right. But even if you did, when you're just trying to hustle and survive, it's hustle, market, sell, and then it's hustle, market, sell, do the work, hustle, market, sell, do the work. And you can't always start slow.
Well, and it evolves on its own. Once you kind of build the machine, we're building the machine, it kind of starts to move on its own, right? And it's like, oh man, you got to keep up with the machine. You got to feed them, got to feed the beast kind of thing. So, and it's what's been challenging is if we had all the time in the world, all the money in the world, in the ideal scenario, how do you build a business, right? You'd have all these things in place prior to, but the reality is you got to pay bills, and you're essentially building a car while it's moving, right? Like, and as you add more things to the vehicle and more people, and you hire one person and you put in a process, and so the car starts to go faster, and it's like, well, I'm not done building it yet. And so, the business is moving. The wheels are turning, man. And you got to keep up, and you got to put the things in place. They say success can kill a business that's not ready for it. And
yes, absolutely.
It can become a mess. And I kind of noticed that early on when I hired my first 2 employees. we didn't have any processes, any systems in place. I wasn't thinking about that. I'm still doing the day-to-day work that they're doing. I'm doing the same thing that my employees are doing. So obviously on top of everything else, so it's very challenging to do that. And that's when you realize how important these systems and processes are. So sorry, go back to what was the original question?
No, I mean, but that's what it's all about, though. It's just about, when you're at that mark now, you look 8 employees, 2 subcontractors, you're at 10 people. This is really at that pivotal point when things start to break. This is at the pivotal point where miscommunications happen, or you think someone's doing, so-and-so's doing this, and you find out that they thought you meant that. And where you need some of that, maybe that first layer of management or even mid-management or an office manager, back end things. These are all of at this point and stage in not just in both revenue and employees when these things kind of come and creep up. But so you're right, systems, policies, procedures, it's you hire people to run the systems.
Right. Well, that's okay. So that's exactly where we're at. So we're at that $1 million mark, and we're 8 employees, full time, and so obviously that includes a bookkeeper, and we have a social media manager now. And so I quickly realized that I only have so many hands, eyes, and ears, and I started realizing, oh wow, once we started adding to the pile of people, that's now I'm like trying to manage I'm essentially managing all the projects, managing everybody's questions. Right. So for next year, the next couple of years, and the goal is really 10 million by 40 for the revenue release for us. So, and we've got benchmarks 3.5, 5, 8.5, and 10. And it's once you start to reverse engineer the numbers and stuff, it seems fairly doable. Like I said, when we first started, I did $88,000 revenue the first year, and the next year after that, we did 225, and then after that, we did 600. You build momentum, it starts compounding. Obviously, your expenses go up, and you have to be on top of that. But I think for us, we need a director of operations. We need somebody to oversee the stuff so that I'm not answering 1,000 questions all day, because I need to put myself in the proper seat, just like I'm putting the employees in their proper seats. We have a 3D guy, an MEP engineer, and an structural engineer. We have a senior, architect, junior architect. So I need to put myself in the captain's chair and do the things that are going to make the business that's the most valuable for the business. Right.
And the most valuable use of your time and the things that only you can do, because as much as you can create a beautiful design, you have other people on your team that can do, as good or maybe 80-90% as good. And then you can maybe come in and tweak it here and there. But there's certain things, a lot of things that, that needs to get done in order for the business to A, run, and B, grow, are only things that you as the owner or CEO can actually do. And then look, I'm just a few years ahead of you. That's it, because I'm learning the same things, learned them and still learning them every single day. But Jonny, I have 2 final questions for you here. Okay. First one is a question that we ask to a lot of people, especially our competitive people on here. And do you love to win or do you hate to lose?
That sounds like a trick question. No, I'm kidding.
Well, it's a Manning question. So
it really is. Look, everybody loves to win. Who doesn't love to win? I think if I had to choose one of those, I'd probably say that I hate to lose, because.
Now why?
Well, because I don't think winning is everything. I think there's more to it than that. I think in order to win, I'm more interested, and I think it's more about the person you have to become in order to achieve the winner. And sometimes, look, you achieve greatness, you could lose and still achieve greatness, right? There's plenty of sports references. Look at the Oakland A's. They didn't win the championship that year. What was that with the movie Moneyball? It's one of my favorite movies. Yeah. Brad Pitt, and they broke the American League World's record of the most wins ever. They didn't win the World Series that year, but so I think everybody loves to win. And look, I'm competitive. I played every sport imaginable. I think I just hate losing. So because I think it's preventable, and I just hate that feeling of not. I think it insinuates I wasn't my best self, and I think that's more important to me. Like, how you win is more important than actually winning. So I think I hate losing.
Okay. All right, good. I think we're at about 50-50 on these, but more importantly for me than what the answer is, I want to know the why behind it. So I love that. Now, last question is, what advice do you have for people listening to the pod who, just some takeaways that that you can give to them? Kind of final takeaways.
Oh man, I wish I would have thought been more prepared for these questions here. But man, I think just try to be your genuine self and have a genuine interest in what you're doing. I mean, people can see right through that. That if you have an agenda, look, there's the old adage like everybody hates a salesman, right? I think just keep your head down and don't get beat. The distractions. They asked Muhammad Ali what the hardest part of his training was, and I think his answer was just not going to the clubs and not drinking and not doing that. And that's, who would have thought that would be his answer, right? And I think that's the biggest thing is to stay focused on your goals. You're going to have to sacrifice. You're going to have to sacrifice short-term, relationships, spending time. Look, I didn't see, Manny's one of my best friends from middle school. I didn't see his child until she was born. 2 years. I didn't meet her. Obviously there was COVID and stuff like that, but right. I think you got to be willing to sacrifice. You got to be willing to not make money for a couple of years. I essentially sacrificed my job and things I had there, for the end goal. And I'm still doing that. I'm not on payroll. I'm not making any money. The business makes money. My employees make money. So I think you have to be willing to sacrifice for what you want. Yeah.
Cool. I love it. I think that's amazing advice. So Jonny, now, what's the best way for people to find you, either online or offline?
Don't come to my home. No, I'm kidding. Online, our website is www.smart-aquatics.com. Our social media is same, smart.aquatics. Apparently, Smart Aquatics is very hard to get, I guess. We got to work on that.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Jonny, thank you so much. I thought this was amazing. So many nuggets of wisdom, and I think our listeners are going to really love this. So thank you very, very, very much. And we will definitely be keeping in touch and following you on social media and everywhere else.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate it. This is great.